Katie sat in the coffee shop where she and Benjamin had met 7 years ago, and she felt the memories washing over her like an unwanted tide. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows as she traced the rim of her latte with her finger, remembering how Benjamin had nervously ordered the wrong coffee that first day in college. He had given it to her with an embarrassed smile and said he didn't mind if it meant he could talk to her longer. That simple moment had changed everything. Their college years felt like a dream now, a beautiful golden haze of late-night conversations under the stars and dreams whispered in the darkness. Benjamin wanted to be an architect, and Katie wanted to write novels, and they spent hours imagining their future together. Benjamin would design homes, and Katie would fill them with stories, and they would travel and grow old together. Or at least that was what they promised each other during those perfect moments when the world felt infinite. But life had a way of complicating perfect promises. By the time they graduated from college and moved into their small apartment, both of them were juggling demanding jobs and the reality of adult responsibilities. Benjamin worked long hours at his firm, sketching blueprints, and Katie took a marketing job that left her exhausted each evening. The conversations became shorter, the dreams felt further away, and Katie began to feel a slow ache in her chest that she couldn't quite explain. Then, Jake appeared at a networking event Katie attended for work. He was from her college days, someone from her literature club who had transferred to another school their sophomore year. He was charming and confident, with dark eyes that seemed to hold secrets and memories of a Katie that felt more alive than the Katie that Benjamin knew now. Jake remembered things about her that Benjamin had forgotten. He asked about her poetry, her dreams of writing novels. He looked at her like she was still that vibrant girl with endless possibilities. Katie tried to ignore the flutter in her stomach when Jake texted her to catch up. She told herself it was innocent, just two old friends reconnecting. But as the weeks went on, the texts became longer and more frequent. They began meeting for coffee, just like she and Benjamin did. But these conversations were different. Jake made her feel seen in a way that Benjamin didn't anymore. Jake asked about her hopes and disappointments. He listened without judgment, and somehow he seemed to understand the version of herself that Katie had begun to lose. One evening, Katie sat across from Benjamin at their dinner table and realized with a startling clarity that she felt more excitement about her upcoming coffee date with Jake than she did about her own relationship. Benjamin was telling her about a difficult project at work, and she was only half listening. She was thinking about what Jake had said in his last message, about how she deserved to be with someone who appreciated every part of her, including the dreamer that Benjamin had stopped seeing. The confusion that began to settle in Katie's mind was dangerous because it wasn't born from a single explosive moment, but rather from 1,000 small moments of disconnection. She began to question everything she and Benjamin had built. Was it real love, or was it just comfort? Was Benjamin truly her first choice, or was he simply her first serious relationship? The doubt spread like poison through her veins, and she found herself unable to stop it. What Katie didn't realize in that moment was that she was making a crucial mistake, one that would haunt her for years to come. She was allowing herself to be seduced by the idea of someone rather than the reality of him, and she was about to destroy something precious because she had forgotten how love evolved beyond the honeymoon phase. The passion she felt for Jake was intoxicating, but it was built on fantasy and memory, not on the deep foundation that she and Benjamin had constructed together through years of genuine commitment. As she texted Jake back that night, agreeing to see him the next evening, Katie felt a thrilling rush of excitement, but underneath it was a trembling fear that she was about to make a choice she could never take back.
Benjamin noticed the change in Katie slowly at first, like watching a photograph fade in the sunlight. She came home later each evening, and when she did arrive, she seemed distant, distracted, as if her mind was somewhere else entirely. He would try to talk to her about his day, about anything really, but Katie would nod and smile while staring at her phone, eyes glazed over. The woman he loved was slipping away right in front of him, and he didn't know how to hold on to her. When Benjamin finally asked her directly about Jake, everything came tumbling out, Katie's voice shaking. She told him about running into Jake at the networking event and how they had been catching up and how Jake made her feel things that she thought she had lost years ago. She told him that she wasn't sure anymore if what she and Benjamin had was real or just a comfortable habit. Benjamin listened in silence, his face growing pale as the words stabbed through his chest like tiny knives. Benjamin didn't yell or cry or beg her to stay. Instead, he sat there, looking at her with an expression of such profound sadness that Katie almost regretted everything immediately. He said softly that he had always known there was a risk that she might realize he wasn't enough, that maybe she had settled for him when she thought there was nothing better out there. He told her that he had spent years trying to be the man she needed, and that it broke his heart to discover that he had never been her first choice after all. Katie tried to explain that it wasn't about him not being enough, that she was just confused and lost in the reality of adult life. She said she needed time to figure out what she wanted and that maybe they could take a break. But Benjamin pulled away, and his eyes held a finality that made Katie's stomach drop. He told her that he couldn't be someone she chose reluctantly, that if she needed to explore things with Jake, then she should do it, but that he couldn't wait around for her to decide. Over the next few days, Benjamin moved quietly through their apartment, gathering his things. He didn't make a scene or try to convince her to change her mind. He simply packed methodically and efficiently, like a man performing a necessary task. Katie watched him fold his clothes and place them in boxes, and she felt her heart shattering, silent tears streaming down her face. This wasn't how it was supposed to happen. Benjamin was supposed to fight for her. He was supposed to tell her that she was making a huge mistake. But Benjamin had already learned a painful truth in his 7 years with Katie. He understood that love couldn't survive on one side alone, that fighting for someone who had already decided to leave was a form of self-destruction. So instead of fighting, he protected himself the only way he knew how, by removing himself completely from the equation. He would not be the desperate boyfriend begging for scraps of attention and affection. On the day Benjamin left their apartment for the last time, he turned to Katie and said something that would haunt her forever, his voice quiet and resigned. He told her that he hoped Jake was worth it and that he hoped the excitement and passion would be enough to sustain her through all the ordinary moments that made up a real life. Then he walked out the door and closed it softly behind him, and Katie was left alone in the apartment that suddenly felt cavernously empty. The silence after he left was deafening. Katie stood in the middle of their living room, surrounded by the remnants of their shared life, and realized with a sickening clarity that she had just made the biggest mistake of her entire existence. But the realization came too late because Benjamin was already gone, and she had no idea where he had gone or if he would ever come back.
Katie threw herself into her relationship with Jake with an intensity that bordered on desperation. She told herself that this was what she wanted. This was the passion and excitement that she had been missing with Benjamin. Jake was attentive and romantic, taking her to candlelit dinners and whispering sweet words that made her heart race. For the first few weeks, it felt like a dream, a second chance at the person she had always wondered about. But slowly, the cracks began to show. Jake was less interested in her dreams and aspirations, and more interested in having her by his side as an accessory, someone who enhanced his image and reputation. When Katie mentioned her novel, the one she had been working on for years, Jake smiled and said that it was cute that she still had hobbies. He wanted her to focus on him, on their relationship, on building a life centered around his career and his ambitions. The conversations that had felt so deep and meaningful when they were reconnecting became surface level and superficial. Jake didn't really ask about her feelings or her thoughts. He talked about himself and his accomplishments constantly. Katie found herself nodding along while her mind drifted to Benjamin, who had always made space for her dreams, who had sketched buildings that she could describe in her stories, who had truly seen her. One evening, Jake came home after what he said was a business dinner, smelling like someone else's perfume. When Katie asked him about it, he became defensive and angry, telling her that she was being crazy and paranoid. He said that she was lucky to have him, that he had chosen her over other women, and that if she couldn't appreciate that, then maybe she wasn't worth his time. The cruelty in his words shocked Katie, and she realized that this was not the Jake from her memories or her imagination. Katie began to spiral into depression. She would lie awake at night thinking about Benjamin, wondering if he was happy, if he had found someone new, if he ever thought about her at all. She started writing letters to him in her journal, letters she never sent because she didn't even know where he lived. She poured her pain into her novel, and that became her only real relationship, the only thing that understood her and held her safely. Her friends noticed the change in her. They saw how she had dimmed like a light slowly losing its electricity. They tried to talk to her about leaving Jake, but Katie felt trapped. She had burned the bridge with Benjamin. She had lost her home and her future as she had imagined it, and the thought of starting over was overwhelming. So she stayed with Jake, even as he grew increasingly cold and disconnected from her. One night, Katie found a photograph of herself with Benjamin tucked away in an old box. They were smiling in the photo, their arms around each other, and they looked so genuinely happy, so perfectly matched. Katie held the photograph to her chest and finally allowed herself to fully feel the magnitude of what she had done. She had chosen passion and excitement over stability and true love, and now she had neither. She had everything she thought she wanted, and nothing she actually needed. Years passed in a blur of mediocrity and regret with Jake. Katie existed rather than lived, and every single day was a reminder of the choice she had made and the man she had carelessly discarded like he was something replaceable, something ordinary, when he had been the most extraordinary part of her life.
Katie was 34 years old when Jake finally left her. He had found someone younger, someone who hadn't yet realized that his charm was hollow and his affection was conditional. He walked out one morning without explanation, and Katie almost felt relieved. The 7-year relationship that had cost her everything had ended as abruptly as it had begun, with no fanfare, no attempt at reconciliation, just a cold goodbye. Alone in her apartment, Katie finally allowed herself to feel everything she had been suppressing for years. She cried until her eyes were swollen and her voice hoarse. She grieved not just the end of her relationship with Jake, but the loss of the life she could have had with Benjamin, the architectural dreams and literary novels, the shared dinners and quiet mornings, the partnership built on genuine understanding and acceptance. She decided to find Benjamin. It took months of searching through social media and old friends, but eventually she tracked him down. He was living in a beautiful city across the country, running his own architectural firm and designing innovative spaces that challenged convention. His portfolio was impressive, and she could see his fingerprints all over his designs, the same thoughtfulness and precision that he had brought to their relationship. Katie found his contact information and stared at his number for hours, gathering courage. She rehearsed what she would say 1,000 times, imagining different scenarios where he might forgive her, or at least agree to hear her out. Finally, one evening, she called him, and when he answered, her breath caught in her throat. Benjamin sounded shocked to hear from her. There was a long silence after she said his name, and Katie thought he might hang up, but he didn't. He simply said hello in a tone that was neither warm nor cold, but carefully neutral. Katie poured out an apology that had been building inside her for 7 years. She told him that she was sorry, that she had made a terrible mistake, that she had chosen wrong, and that she had spent every day since regretting her decision. Benjamin listened without interrupting, and when Katie finally finished her apology, he took a breath and told her something that shattered her completely. He said that he had moved on, that he had built a beautiful life without her, and that he was engaged to someone who had chosen him first. He said it not to hurt her, but as a statement of fact, and somehow that made it worse. Katie had spent 7 years waiting and regretting, while Benjamin had learned to let go and build something new.
The conversation was brief and cordial, and it ended with Benjamin saying that he was glad she had found happiness and that he hoped she would continue to find peace in her life. He didn't say that he hoped they could be friends or that he wanted to stay in touch. He simply ended the call and left Katie with nothing but the hollow sound of a dial tone. Katie hung up the phone, and the realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. Benjamin was truly gone from her life, not because he was being cruel, but because he had finally stopped waiting for her, and that was so much more painful than any anger or rejection could have ever been. He had moved on completely, and she was left alone with her regrets and her memories and the knowledge that she had destroyed something beautiful and irreplaceable. She looked at her novel, finally completed after all these years, and it felt hollow because it had been written for the wrong reasons. Every character, every plot point, every moment of vulnerability in those pages was stained with the memory of Benjamin and the choices she had made. The book was a monument to her own selfishness and her refusal to appreciate what she had while she still had it.
5 years later, Katie sat in a bookstore holding a copy of her published novel. It had taken 10 years from start to finish, but she had finally completed it, and it had found a publisher. The book told the story of a woman who lost the love of her life by chasing a fantasy and spent years realizing that some choices can never be undone. Critics praised it for its raw honesty and emotional depth, not knowing that every word had been pulled from her own shattered heart. Katie did book signings and gave readings, and when people asked her if the story was autobiographical, she simply smiled and said that all stories come from somewhere. She had become successful in her career, doing the thing that Benjamin had always believed in her ability to do, but the success felt hollow and incomplete because she couldn't share it with him. She imagined him reading her book and understanding finally why she had made the choices she had, and maybe even finding forgiveness in those pages. She had never married again. There had been relationships here and there, but nothing that felt real because she was always comparing them to what she had lost with Benjamin. She had become a woman defined by a mistake, by a moment of weakness and poor judgment that had rippled through her entire life. She wondered sometimes if Benjamin read her book and if he recognized himself in the chapters, or if he was too busy being happy in his life to think about her at all. One day, while signing books at an event, a woman approached her with kind eyes and told her that the novel had changed her life. The woman said that she had been on the verge of leaving her partner for someone from her past, and the book had made her realize that passion without substance was just an illusion. She thanked Katie for writing something so honest and so real, and Katie felt tears spring to her eyes. At least her pain had meaning. At least someone else had been saved from making the same devastating mistake. Katie realized in that moment that her life had become a cautionary tale, a warning to others about the dangers of taking love for granted and chasing fantasies instead of nurturing reality. She had lost Benjamin, but her loss had become a gift to readers around the world who learned from her mistakes and made better choices in their own lives. It was small comfort for a heart that would never fully heal, but it was something. She thought often about Benjamin and wondered if he was happy, if he had children, if his wife knew about the woman who had loved him first and lost him so carelessly. She had heard through mutual friends that he had never forgotten her, that sometimes in unguarded moments he seemed sad when her name came up. But those were just rumors, and Katie tried not to hold on to them, because holding on to hope was a form of torture. The truth that Katie had come to understand was that some people come into our lives as our greatest teachers, and sometimes the lesson we need to learn is how to appreciate them before they leave. Benjamin had been her first choice, her greatest love, and the one person who had truly seen her, and she had thrown it away, chasing something she thought was better. No amount of success or accolades could ever make up for that loss. As Katie signed another book, she wrote a message to the reader that came from the deepest part of her soul. She wrote that love was not a spectator sport, that it required constant attention and nurturing, and that the person standing beside you in the quiet moments was worth infinitely more than someone who made your heart race with excitement. She signed her name and thought of Benjamin and all the choices she would undo if she could.
Katie had learned too late that her first choice had been the right choice, and that sometimes we don't appreciate what we have until it is gone forever. The life she could have built with Benjamin remained frozen in time, a perfect possibility that would never be realized because she had chosen passion over partnership and fantasy over reality. Her legacy became not her novels or her success, but her regret, and the lesson that sometimes the greatest love stories are the ones we destroy by our own carelessness and selfishness.